Well, it was a fascinating day yesterday in Parliament, and I think Andrew Rhodes spoke eloquently on behalf, as the leading exponent of the anti-gambling frat. He was given a very easy time by the Select Committee. Part of that appeared to be because a number of MPs on the Select Committee don't seem to know anything about gambling, and little more about, for example, digital concerns like VPNs. They'd never even heard of things like that. Quite what use these people are on a DCMS committee, I'm unclear. There are a couple of things of note when you talk about not just Andrew Rhodes' performance, but Stuart Andrew, who's the current gambling minister. When the current gambling minister started off his speech, he talked about one of his first appointments was to go and see the families of those that had experienced the gambling-related harm. One assumes that's the ultimate in gambling-related harm, in other words, suicides, and how he was affected by that. From these meetings, it appears that Mr. Andrew feels that what should happen in life is government ministers and their regulators should determine how people spend their money. Not borrow money, but how they spend their money. This is where it's got to. This is a key infringement into people's rights to free choice. Now, we all know on a Friday night, for example, we go out for a dinner and then we maybe go down the pub and we end up having 7 or 8 pints or too many glasses of champagne or whatever. The next morning you wake up and you go, oh, I'm never going to do that again. That was the wrong thing to do for our health and everything else like that. And the same would be true of food, smoking, shopping, all these sort of addictive products. When we spend our money in life, it's really, it's rarely something that's a benefit other than to the mental well-being of the individual. And I think what has struck me about this series of debates at DCMS is the lack of consideration for the mental well-being for the millions of punters out there who have bet in the UK market for decades. There is absolutely no consideration, not one single question emanated from the point of view of the punter. Nobody was asking the central question, which is how will gambling affordability checks, which will inevitably lead to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people forced onto the black market or to stop gambling, how will that affect their mental well-being? I know, Mr. Andrew and Mr. Rhodes, that you both say that what you're concerned about is suicides and gambling-related harm, but gambling benefit is equally, if not more important than gambling harm. And why? Because there are many more people who engage in gambling who derive enormous pleasure from it and mental well-being from it, who are being totally ignored in plans. Let me give you the example of the postcodes, which was discussed at the Select Committee. Mr. Rhodes would like to see, and indeed he's already had it in discussion papers with operators, that the operators take into account where somebody lives, your postcode, when you have a bet. Let me tell you as an operator where that ends up. That ends up with hundreds of thousands of people having their accounts closed. Why? Because they live in a socially depressed area or an area of the country where people perhaps don't earn as much money as those that live in St George's Hill in Weybridge, of course, and they will be forced to provide affordability checks to operators, and most likely most of them will fail. They will fail those checks. What happens to them then? This is one central issue that doesn't seem to affect either Mr. Rhodes, who's on an anti-gambling platform anyway, in my view, and Mr. Andrew, the current gambling minister, the latest in a long line of gambling ministers, most of which who knew less than the last performer. What happens to those people who inevitably fail affordability checks or don't provide sufficient income to interest the gambling company to continue to do business with them? Because that's also a fact. I mean, if somebody's on a very low income or doesn't want to provide a bank statement that shows that supports their level of turnover. It doesn't mean to say that they don't have the money. It just means to say that's all they're prepared to give the gambling operator, or even not prepared to give the gambling operator anything. They end up with their accounts closed or suspended or the same. What happens to them then? Nobody asks the question, not the select committee, and certainly not answered by Mr. Rhodes and not answered by Mr. Andrew, as to what happens to these people. What happens to their mental health? Because gambling is a clear and positive benefit to many people in life. This is something that is totally ignored by the committee, and it should be explored, because if you're going to talk about gambling related harm, gambling benefit is equally, if not more important than the exploration of gambling harm. If you take something like gambling away from British society, what have you got left? Why is there no consideration for the clear benefits of gambling? Why has there been no DCMS select committee where punters are allowed to express their views? After all, they're the ones that are most impacted by affordability plans. Where was the DCMS select committee in which punters were engaged with, were asked questions as to how affordability would affect them, how they play, how they gamble, how they use their money, what they're prepared to give operators and why not? Why is it that they're concerned about giving data to gambling operators? Well, I understand exactly what the problems are, of course, but why is DCMS not interested in asking punters these questions? I know Mr. Rhodes is not interested in asking that section of the community, those millions of gamblers, because I don't accept that the Gambling Commission looks at the bigger picture. Not at all. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. They just look at harm. They're only interested in harm. And the fact of the matter is that gambling is a clear benefit. I've said it again. I said it before, and I'll make no apologies for repeating it. It's a vital industry to millions of people in this country. How do I know that? Because for decades I've done business with punters and gamblers on the racetrack, off the racetrack, online, in betting shops. I mean, a betting shop, for example, is a fantastic area of the community, and it's being destroyed, it's being eroded. Part of that is the activities of the big gambling companies themselves, who have not behaved very well. But the bottom line is that, little independent betting shops are a vital area of the community, and all of these kind of factors is being totally ignored in this exploration of whether or not we should go into affordability checks. One final point. Affordability checks won't end up with the nonsense of the absurd £3 a day level, which will have companies like me endlessly checking our customers, because most people who bet online with my firm will end up having to pass a so-called affordability checks. They bet well beyond £3 a day. So the idea that 3% of gamblers are going to be impacted by the check is a complete fiction. It's a total fiction. It's actually a number based on the totality of gambling, which includes many, many millions of dormant accounts of people who hardly ever have a bet. So that 3% becomes a much bigger number. But there is a survey. The Gambling Commission have said that they will listen to this survey this time around. I don't believe them. I believe they're on a mission, they're on a path. But the best thing that you can do is fill out the form. Get online, fill out the form, because this key moment in British society is something to resist, and to resist with all your might, for some of the reasons I've explained tonight. Thanks for your time. Good luck filling out their exhaustive form.